Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Good Orderly Direction, Practical Tools of the Bible. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. Today we're discussing Exodus chapters 15 through 17. The Israelites begin to complain about hunger and thirst. Moses led Israel from the Red Sea and into the desert. Remember, we just got out of the Passover and they've crossed through the Red Sea and they are moving on toward that land of milk and honey. For 3 days, they traveled without finding water. So they're on this journey to a rich and meaningful life. They're on this journey to the land of milk and honey. But on the way, it's not going to be easy. And they knew about this going into it. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became fit to drink. There, the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them and put them to the test. He said, "If you listen carefully to God and do what is right in His eyes, if you pay attention to His commands and keep all His decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the God who heals you." Basically, God is issuing a challenge at this point. He says, follow what I tell you to do, follow Scripture, and you will be safe. So let's think about that again. Good orderly direction. Prudence is a combination of wisdom and patience, respect for one another and respect for yourself. Earnestness, I'm trying to do the mnemonic in my head. Earnestness, doing what is right and behaving with integrity. Forgiveness, endurance or courage, compassion, selflessness. All of these things are traits that are essential to building a healthy community. So God is saying, you really need to start using these traits, using these principles to strengthen your community. And if you do that, then you will survive. The whole Israelite community set out and came to the desert where they grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If God had only killed us in Egypt where we ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve and we're all going to die." So another lesson here, it is not new for the greatest kindness to be seen as the greatest injuries sometimes. It's unlikely that they had plenty of food to eat in Egypt. They were slaves after all. Nor could they actually fear dying of hunger in the wilderness, even in the desert while they had their herds. Think about camels, for example. They can go a long way without having to have additional water, and camels do make milk. We know this. So they did have ability to get fluid. Additionally, animals are able to drink water that is not palatable for humans. So again, the animals were able to ingest the water and make milk. Is that ideal? No, it's not the ideal situation, but will it keep them from dying? Likely. When you have endured trials, how has your memory of the past been altered? And we see this a lot in recovery. And we see this a lot when people are making changes in their life, big changes like getting a divorce or recovering from addiction or something like that. When they get into it, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, and their brain goes back and focuses on the past and the good things. It's like, okay, was it really as bad as I thought? And we've talked about this in other videos in terms of readiness for change. When the going gets tough, people's motivation tends to wane and they start thinking, was it really that bad? They fall back into a stage of either pre-contemplation or contemplation. So this is a time when it's important to actually have a list that you can consult, when you can look back and objectively see, okay, these are the things I'm remembering or romanticizing, but here's all this other stuff that I am selectively forgetting right now. To remind yourself why you made this move. During times of trial, we're called upon to use radical acceptance, prudence, and endurance. When we make changes, it is going to be uncomfortable. Change causes crisis, and crisis causes change. It is not going to be easy to learn the new behaviors, to start this new journey. And it's important to embrace the good with the bad, the radical acceptance. Okay, the Israelites were struggling right now. They didn't have food handy sometimes. Maybe they got a little bit hungrier than necessarily they would have in Egypt. I don't know. Like I said, they were slaves. They probably didn't have all that much food. But embracing the good, they were no longer being beaten. They were no longer being abused. With the bad, all right, we have some temporary challenges here. Remember, prudence is that combination of patience and wisdom. The wisdom, the knowledge of where they actually came from and how bad it was, and the knowledge of what they were going to and what they had there right in front of them. Being mindful of the fact that, okay, it's probably not as catastrophic as I'm making it out to be, because we actually can survive. May not be super comfortable right now, but we can survive. And that's where the endurance comes in. When you make those changes, it's important to remember why you're making the change. It's important to have the skills and tools you're going, to have the constitution to endure those trials and recognize that you can get through to the other side. Problems. Parental discipline is a perfect example. So often we set limits on our children, or we have to enact, become the people that we know that they can be. However, when they're in the midst of it, the children often see it as unfair and they get angry about it. The parents, the caregivers, are trying to help. They are trying to nurture and guide, the children not seeing it so much. Similarly, and we may see this in adults as well as counselors and other people, whether you want to call it empowerment or non-parentification or tough love, when we step back sometimes and say, okay, you have the skills, you have the tools, now you need to be the one to take the steps. I'm not going to do it for you. And a lot of times when we do that, people may feel abandoned. They may get angry because they expected us to do it for them. However, once they realize that they do have the ability to do this, once they start feeling empowered, it helps them grow and move to that next step. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them to see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. God was already planning for people to have a rest on the 7th day. So everybody was to save some. That way, everybody had plenty on the 7th day. Moses said to the people, God has heard your grumbling against him. But who are we that you should grumble against us? You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against God. When I was growing up, my mother used to say, don't hate the messenger. And Moses and Aaron were experiencing this at this point. They were trying to help the people. They were trying to lead them out of this horrible situation that they were in. And Moses and Aaron had implicit faith in God. They had implicit faith that there would be enough. There would be plenty. People would not, die of hunger and thirst. It's also important to recognize the people are grumbling, But they had made the choice to willfully go with Moses and Aaron. They weren't being held captive. They could have gone out on their own. They could have returned back to Egypt. They could have done whatever they wanted, but they were still following along. Now they're mad at Moses for the choices they had made. It's important to reflect when situations like this happen. Who are you really mad at? In this case, who are the Israelites really mad at? Are they mad at themselves for leaving Egypt, where they knew it was a bad situation, but it was predictable, and they knew they would have at least minimal food? However, they also knew they would be abused. So are they mad at themselves for the choice to try to move to something better? Are they mad at the situation? And as I said, change is hard and change is painful. And when we're going through extreme changes, it can be really frustrating. So yeah, they could be mad at the situation. However, they're taking it out on Moses and Aaron. They're saying, hey, you need to fix this. Are they mad at the Pharaoh? Well, at this point, we're really not hearing a lot of that, but it's important for them to reflect on the fact that the Pharaoh created the conditions that actually made it necessary for them to change. And are they angry at God? And the answer is probably yes here, because they want God to provide them everything, and they want it to happen right now. They don't want to have to work for it. They want to walk out of Egypt and all of a sudden be in the land of milk and honey. And that's just not the way change happens. Whether you're leaving a bad relationship or making some other type of change like recovery, you walk out of that situation. You leave that situation or make the decision to change, but there's a learning curve. There's a process to getting to your ultimate goal. You very rarely are going to walk out of a bad situation and automatically be at your destination. There is a process, and the people need to recognize that. Remember, anger is an emotional response to threat. In this case, they're angry about the unknown. They're angry about discomfort. So in the evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew on the ground. When the dew was gone, thin flakes of frost appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is this?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said, "It's the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need." The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some gathered little. Everyone gathered just as much as they needed. This is important. We need to respect the different needs of individuals for love, for communication, for recovery, for whatever they need. Some souls are more wounded than others, and they may need different things or more or less of things than other people. In this particular case, we're talking about food. You can have a 200-pound person and you can have a 95-pound person. They don't need the same amount. Yes, each one of them is just one person, but they need different amounts. Same thing for families. In this particular case, certain clans may have had 15 people in it, and others may have had 5. So they only gathered as much as they needed to satisfy each person. Then Moses said, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some people kept part of it until the morning. And then in the morning, it was full of maggots and began to smell. This is a little curious. So you're thinking, well, they must have gotten too much. No, remember, we just heard they gathered just what they needed. So they only had what they needed, but they decided to divide it so they had some saved for the next day. When you don't get your needs met, it tends to make you angrier and more impatient. So they went to bed hungry, and they got up in the morning thinking they would be able to eat the leftovers, and there weren't any. And that's important because remember, the next morning they were going to get up and they were going to have food again. So they didn't need it. And what we're seeing here is their lack of faith, their lack of trust in God to provide what they needed. How does saving things, how does not following good orderly direction, how does being stingy with things and holding on to them just in case you need it breed maggots in your soul, so to speak? And how does it work against good orderly direction? How does it work against the community being prudent and earnest and respectful and forgiving and compassionate and selfless? How do we see the Israelites' behavior working against those principles? Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. So we're seeing that the people are learning that they would get their needs met. However, they were not weighed down by excess, when they were not holding on to things, when they were not hoarding things, when they didn't have extra to carry. It lightened their load so they could move forward. But the next day, they would get exactly what they needed. Think about yourself. How is it that in the morning you wake up and you get exactly what you need? They began to learn that if they worked together and followed God, there would be plenty. When we follow good orderly direction, when we're compassionate and selfless with one another, then we share. If one person has a need and we have excess, we share. And that goes to the whole notion of building community.